All right, Steve Palladino from Palladino Power Project. Bring you part 6 in this series of videos on training load metrics. And in this case, I'm going to bring you another case illustration. This one is Nicholas Spector, who is an Olympic trials qualifier and will be running Olympic trials in a couple of days here in Atlanta. So I'd like to go over his training load metrics with you. And remember, there are other videos here in this series prior to this one. So basically, I want to start with this. This is a 6-month view of his training load. Well, Nick and I didn't start working together until after Chicago Marathon. It was a little bit after Chicago Marathon that we actually started working together. So I don't have a couple of pieces of data. Obviously, here this is my attempt to sort of seed the performance manager chart. But when I'm starting with this to illustrate a point. If you are a Stride user and you're using Performance Manager or you're using Power Center, there is My Training, and there's a little line there that shows you your quote unquote 6-week rolling average, which is really your exponentially weighted rolling average with a 6-week or 42-day time constant. When you look at that and you also look at RSB, it's going to be an error. This is all of this stuff early on for Nick. That is not very accurate. I did put in some seeding, which is a way of preloading the performance manager chart, so these metrics become accurate a little bit more rapidly, become valid a little bit more rapidly. But early on, until you have maybe a couple months, maybe even up to 3 months data, it can be off. It can be what you're seeing in Power Center. So if you're a new user, give it some time, and it's going to get accurate just by having all of your runs. And that's another point I haven't made so far in the entire series. For this to be accurate, you have to have all of your runs. If you're missing using power on some of them, you somehow got to get that running stress score in there, some way of getting it in there, and there are ways of doing that. I'm not going to go into it in this video. I can do it easily in WKO, but you got to make sure every run, every bit of RSS or TSS is accounted for this to be valid, to be more valid, I should say. So I start with that. So Nick ran Chicago, and he missed the Olympic trials qualifying time, and sort of running out of time. So Nick he entered CIM, California International Marathon, and also Houston Marathon as a backup. And Houston Marathon was the last day that you can qualify. So let me switch screens a little bit, or switch images or time ranges. So instead of 6 months, I'm just giving you everything since Chicago, because that's when things started getting more valid, more reasonable in terms of what we're seeing in the performance manager chart. So I started working with Nick, and after a brief recovery, and that's one thing I got to tip my hat to Nick. He he was in a situation where he just couldn't take your typical couple weeks off after a marathon, or just a little bit of easy running here and there, or even some people take even longer, a month off, or a month of easy every other day sort of thing, just recovery stuff. He couldn't afford to do that because he'd be giving up too much chronic training load, and he has has to do a quick turnaround, get ready for another marathon. So I tip my hat to Nick for his resilience here, and it's plain to see he's got a lot of talent, a lot of room for growing. But in any case, we started building his training load back up pretty rapidly. You can see, we just went from 0 ramp rate up to 7 ramp rate all pretty quick here. Now, again, this it may be a little bit flatter than that in reality, but then we did a little mini taper here, another little mini taper, but we're still keeping the training load. The intensity is pretty high here. And then finally, we taper for CIM. And so we ran through this taper to try to get him to positive TSB. In this case, it reached positive 15, that's cool. That's about right. 15, 25, somewhere in there. And we wanted to get to negative. And he got down to plus 0.1. So not perfect. Would like to see that down a little bit more. Again, I'm not 100% sure that's perfectly accurate because this is in the early stages, despite me seeding things. But I would have liked to see this a little bit more negative. Well, CIM was a rainy day and it had wind on a couple sections of the course, and Nick read it pretty well. I think he read it that it just wasn't going to happen on that day because of the conditions, and so he bagged it early, which I commend him for, and allowed him to recover and start getting back into training. So he had another race in here. Might have been Club Nationals, I'm not sure. I can't recall. But anyway, after that is like, let's get back on the horse again and get ready for Houston. So you can see from the ramp rate, the trend is upwards, and we got into a positive ramp rate from about Christmas for about 1 month. Again, we did a taper that got him to a TSB of plus 19 and plus 0.5 ramp rate the day before. So again, in my opinion, not perfect. I would have liked to see that get to a negative ramp rate for a day or two, and a TSB in that range of plus 15 to plus 25. But the great thing is Nick really caught it well, and he got his qualifying time, which was awesome. We were elated. I was elated. I'm sure he was as well. But here we are in the end of January preparing for a race that's in the end of February. So again, hats off to Nick. He has to do a quick turnaround, quick recovery, and then get right back into the training. And that's what you see, a little recovery here for a week, and then it's like, let's start getting the miles back up. And here we go, starting to trend positive again, and notice that his chronic training load actually is increasing each time. So because he didn't spend a whole long time recovering and allow that CTL to drop, he was able to, sequentially build his chronic training load. So chronic training load is looking pretty good. Now we start a taper. So we have taper starting here. I'm going to switch over to this look at it, and that particular chart. And this actually projects, again, I plan what I expect to see in terms of TSS. I know if it's a 7 mile run, it's going to be, between say 48 and 50 TSS. It usually is, and he's done a bunch of them. So I know what to put in terms of the plan, because the tapers are all about the same. I know what TSS he gets for each part of the taper. So I'm able to put that in and project what it will be, both in terms of the TSB and the ramp rate on race day. So in this case, on race day, we're projected to a 22 TSB, which is the best of his entire marathon sequence here. And finally, I'm able to get him into a negative ramp rate for 1 day, which this is a pretty good taper. This is a pretty good taper to get that much build sequentially over 3 marathons and still be able to get him to a good handoff spot for TSB and a ramp rate on race day. That's pretty nice. Now I want to just go back one more time and look at this. This is his intensity load. So you can see that, again, the yellow dots, like the blue dots above, the yellow dots below are all races. Besides being able to build his chronic training load, which is non-specific, it's the TSS elements that's leading to his overall training load, his duration and relative intensity combined together, right? So we're building that, but we can also see the composition growing in terms of the intensity load greater and equal to 95% of FTP. We're growing that, and then there's the taper. I think this is a great story of a guy who wanted to get to the trials, wanted to qualify. He worked his butt off and had to recover and get back on the horse again. And then once he qualified, had to recover quick and get back on the horse once again. And he's done so with flying colors, as far as I'm concerned. So there's a review looking at training load metrics for another Olympic trials qualifier. And good luck to Nick in a couple days. Hope this is helpful in your understanding of training load and metrics. And thank you for watching.